Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry, but could you please keep it down just a little? I'm trying to get some work done here. Please? Thank you.
So the first ever episode of Discuss It with Deontay features the one-of-a-kind Peter Lawson Jones. And one thing I learned about Peter is that some of the most successful people in the world are very, very humble and unassuming. Now, it's not true for everyone, but it's most certainly true for the Peter Lawson Jones. I am with the peerless Peter Lawson Jones, actor, politician, consultant, father, husband, role model, Harvard graduate, and icon. Sir, it is a plum-pleasing pleasure to talk to you today.
Well, you're awful alliterative. Peter the Peerless, plum-pleasing pleasure. There's a plethora of P's in your vocabulary, young man.
Yes, thank you so much. How are you today?
So I'm great. I have nothing to complain about. Uh, During the course of my life, I've been able to indulge many of my passions in a way that's provided for the family. My three kids are all doing well. My wife's put up with me for another day. So I really, I'm in good health. It's a beautiful day today. So what is there to complain about?
Yeah, you know what? I feel like optimism is the way to go. And that is absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And it is actually.
I mean, there's enough tough things to happen to us in life. So we need to have to be rather sanguine and optimistic and not be pessimist and cynical. You don't want to be that. That's not constructive at all. And people can sense that. I always say there's two kinds of people in this world. Mm-hmm. They're the people that I encounter on the street, and I immediately want to turn and go the opposite direction because I know they're going to unload all of their troubles on me, and I'm going to feel worse as a result of the interaction. And there are those that just have a certain radiance, and they radiate joy and happiness. I can't wait to see and hug them. So if you've got a choice, be the optimist. That doesn't mean you have to be silly. It doesn't mean you have to be unrealistic. But it's always better to be optimist and think that things are going to turn out well rather than things are going to turn out poorly for you.
You got that right. So I always say lifters and leaners are the people in the world. Lifters, they reaffirm you, they edify you, and they make you feel like you can do whatever you want. Whereas leaners, they'll lean on you and suck the life out of you, and they're negative Nancy.
They're drainers.
Yes. So
right. They innervate you.
Yes. Yeah, you speak the truth. So I just wanted people
occasionally to... I do.
That's what OJ said.
Oh, wait. PJ and OJ, two very different people.
Yes. One of the unexpected surprises with Peter is just how down to earth and laid back he is. You would think, being a Harvard graduate, that, this guy is going to be just a really upper crust, Grey Poupon chomping dude, but he is anything but that. And you can really pretty much go anywhere with Peter from a conversation standpoint. And to be honest with you, I think it's one of his most endearing qualities. You are a very powerful figure in Black history. And ironically, this is the first day past Black History Month. I take that very seriously. So they always talk about military people, thank you for your service. But I would tell you, thank you for your service as a Black American and doing the things that you've done and continue to do.
Well, I'd like to think that to some extent I've inspired somebody to do something positive because I've certainly been a beneficiary of positive inspiration from others, and I continue to be, even at my somewhat advanced age. And I believe that we're here to make a difference in the world for our having been here, and that we all have a responsibility, amongst other things. Of course, we have to provide for ourselves, we have to provide for our families, but we all need to find some way to make the world a better place because we have the privilege of being here, because the odds of even being born are 1 out of a trillion. So you might as well make use of it and make use of it in a constructive way that reverberates and helps others along the way.
Yeah, that is powerful. And I feel like that we all come from the sensibilities that we have comes from where we come from. And one thing I'm fascinated about with you is that you're growing up, just looking at this, I guess your grandfather, Lawson Jones, he grew up in North Carolina.
Oh my goodness, you've done your research. I've probably sat for dozens and dozens of interviews and nobody's ever said that, but absolutely. Yeah, that's where I get my middle name. from my paternal grandfather. And he was apparently a very talented sharecropper. His crop, North Carolina, not surprisingly, was tobacco.
Yeah.
And he and my grandmother had 11 children, 7 boys and 4 girls. And he moved out of North Carolina because he really had no choice. And when I said no choice, because one day the sheriff and a number of his deputies, obviously they were European American, rode up to his farm, and they were apparently looking for some African American kid who had committed some crime, allegedly. And my grandfather was anticipating their arrival. So he and all of my dad's older brothers were armed when the deputy and the deputies and the sheriff arrived.
Wow.
And my grandfather said, yes, you may indeed be looking for some black kid who may have committed a crime, but it's none of these young men here. But he realized that kind of resistance would come with a price. And so he knew he needed to move the family out. So he did, out of North Carolina, Vance County, to Camden, New Jersey, right across the bridge from Philly.
You need this book because, as Wayne Dawson says, the seeds of greatness are within you. Just me knowing the history of this country, the first thing I want to know is that your grandfather, were you around when he was around?
I only had the privilege of knowing one of my 4 grandparents, and that was my paternal grandmother.
Okay.
And she passed when I was 13. And of course, she was living in Camden, New Jersey, so I only got to see her during the summers.
Okay. So I pretty much would just imagine that your grandfather was around the turn of the century. Is that kind of
yes,
early 1900s?
Yes, yeah, late 1800s. Certainly was born before the turn of the century.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I saw a comedy show years ago where they were talking about people in the 60s think they had it bad. Well, just imagine people from the 20s.
Well, see, that's the whole thing. So I always, maybe my perspective on where we are as African Americans in this country and how far the country has come has certainly impacted by, I know that my parents had more opportunities than their parents. My dad was the first in his family of 11 to go to attend college and graduate from college, Ohio University. My mom was, she had one older brother and older sister, and the 3 of them were the first in their families to graduate from college. My mother was the first, amongst the first African American women to stay in dorms at Michigan State University.
Wow.
My dad was at Ohio University at the time when he couldn't stay in the dorms. And if it hadn't been for some white Methodist students who had a co-op, who opened up their co-op to my dad and to another black student, I don't know where my father would have lived when he was at OU. And this is Athens, Ohio. We aren't talking Athens, Georgia.
Yeah.
My dad had already played the Negro baseball leagues for a summer when he went to OU, but he couldn't play on the baseball team there, not because of any policy at OU, but because the Southern teams would not take the field against a team from the North that had a black ball player on their squad. So, and that was the most important part of the season for a Northern team, was their Southern tour. So when I think about the challenges that my parents faced, which were less than the challenges than their parents faced, and I know that I've had more opportunity in every respect than my parents had, and that my kids had more than me, and I felt I had plenty of opportunity. So when I look at where we have come as a country, we've come a long way. So I'm not somebody who's just absolutely cynical about the progress that has been made in America. There's more that needs to be done. That's without a question. We haven't reached utopia nirvana yet, but it's a false narrative. Anybody who says, that 2023, we're in the same place we were in 1923 or 1953 is delusional.
Is it dangerous to not focus on driving because I'm busy looking at this amazing book? I'm just wondering. Now, I know that you are an only child, and with everything that you have as far as your background with your parents and your grandparents, I think it's really impressive that you have done what you've done, that you've ascended to where you've ascended to. My question is, how important is it to be inspired by people as a child to your future possibilities?
Absolutely essential. Uh, I am fond of saying that everything I've managed to achieve in life, anything good, is because of my parents. Anything bad, I figured that out all on my own. And that's one reason why, even during my career as an elected official, when I was in the Ohio House of Representatives, I authored the bill that established Ohio Commission on Fatherhood. When I became a Cuyahoga County Commissioner, I started the Cuyahoga County Fatherhood Initiative. Why? Because I believe that every child deserves to have two loving, nurturing parents in their life. And unfortunately, that's seldom the case.
Yeah.
It's not the case as much as it should be. So there's no question that my parents imbued me with a certain faith in myself and in the possibilities. And that's what, if I have soared, it's because of that. I owe that to them and bringing me up in a way that I believed in myself and I believed in my potential. And I also believed that nothing would get in the way of me actualizing my potential other than me. That racism wasn't going to stop me, that the fact that I didn't come from an affluent, wealthy family. I came from a solid middle class background, but I didn't come from an affluent family. But my parents raised me in a way that to believe that there were no impediments to my success and to what I wanted to achieve in life. And and unfortunately, a lot of parents don't do that. A lot of parents pass on their hurts and their pain and their trauma to their kids.
Yeah.
And the kids don't believe that they can achieve because they've been filled with all this doubt as a result of their parents unloading that on them.
Yeah.
I remember stories I could tell about my dad. He and I were driving across country. I was working, I was in law school and I was working in LA that summer.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always, at the beginning of the school year, but whether it was college or law school, he would drive up with me and then he would fly home or take the train back home. Then at the end of the semester, end of the school year, he'd be there. We'd drive down together. When I worked in DC for a couple years, we drove there when I was starting. The summer I worked in San Francisco, he drove out there with me. The summer that I worked in LA. And I can remember saying to him, we were driving along and I said to him, Dad, you didn't tell me that life could be as tough as it sometimes is. He said, yeah. Your mom and I did that on purpose. We didn't want you to have a chip on your shoulder. We didn't want you to be cynical. We didn't want you to be pessimistic. And we figured you were smart enough to figure out what you needed to figure out to succeed in life. And I think more parents need to do that. That's not to say that you don't warn kids of certain inherent dangers, societal dangers, that racism exists, etc. But you don't so poison them that they're paralyzed and don't feel that they can win. Because if a person doesn't believe he or she can win, then they won't win. They can't win.
Yeah.
You've got to see that path to victory.
Yeah, and racism can be such a debilitating thing. I know, didn't you guys have to pay like a black tax or something from when you were living in, what was that, Shaker Heights or something?
Yeah, actually, ironically, 360 degrees on the other, 180 degrees on the other side of the oval on which I currently live.
Is that what it was called?
That's what it was informally termed, right?
A colloquial.
But it was not technical or formal term, but that was a reality, right? That was de facto what it was. My parents, I know they paid a little bit more for their home in Shaker Heights than a white family would have paid. And to some extent, it is believed that the woman who sold my parents their home was so disliked in the neighborhood that she wanted to penalize her neighbors by selling her home to an African American family.
Wow. That'll teach them. Oh my God, that's bad.
Yeah, but that's probably true. It's probably more than just urban legend.
Well, one thing I like about the fact of your journey, it's the hallmark of your journey, is that you never let any of your circumstances or even the reality of the times define you. And in fact, you decide to really write your own story and build your own luck. And the luck was built through just your tenacity. So you attended Harvard in 1971. You graduated in 75. You said it was 8 to 10% African American.
About 8%.
About 8%. And
Yeah.
you were an undergrad, right?
I was an undergrad
Okay.
at Harvard from 71 to 75.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. So I also know that you graduated law school about 1980.
That's correct.
So when you think about all of that, that is an illustrious career just from the time you were born to the time you were just a very young man. And that says a lot because coming from that era, this is the era of Rosa Parks. When the time when you were born, it was around those times.
Oh, sure. I was born in 1952.
So that's 3 years before Rosa Parks. In the December 1st, 1955, the civil rights movement took place from 55 to 68. And so when you think about that, that was all a part of you growing, and you lived in the world like that. So
Right. That was the background music of my
yeah,
life.
exactly. Against the backdrop of racial strife and a lot of second-class citizenship, you managed to, as Maya Angelou says, still I rise. You rose. What was that like when you were accomplishing things that were sort of outlier things that were uncommon to people of color?
Well, one thing, I was always comfortable being in diverse settings. So I was never intimidated by being around white students. I didn't think they were smarter than I was. There were some who were smarter and there were some who weren't. It was just how it was. And so, the Cleveland public school system was really a phenomenal public school system at that time in many respects, not in all regards, but in many respects. I mean, it was considered one of the top public school systems in the state and in the country. And I was in the major work program, and our classes as major work students were integrated. And so it was no big deal either in the major work program in Cleveland Public Schools or when my family moved to Shaker. I wasn't at all paralyzed in fear or anxious, experience any angst about being around white students.
Wow.
And I think my parents kind of prepared me for that. And through them, they had friends who were of different races and religions, and so I was not uncomfortable. I remember a friend of mine at Byron Junior High School, it's now Shaker Middle School, a young black woman, and she said to me, "Peter, before I moved to Shaker, I thought all white people were beautiful."
Wow.
Because all she had seen was portrayals of white people on TV and in the movies, where where all the handsome and beautiful people are.
Wow.
So and I looked at it, I'm like, "What, you thought that?" Because I knew better.
Yeah.
I knew they weren't inherently better looking, smarter, kinder, gentler, anything like that. They were all human beings, and we all got our struggles and our challenges and our strengths and our weaknesses. So I think I was well prepared to be thrown into the diverse settings that Harvard College was, that Harvard Law School was, working in DC on Capitol Hill in my early 20s, Shaker Heights High School, major work program in Cleveland. So none of this was foreign to me, and I didn't approach it with a feeling of inferiority.
Wow.
That I had to reach up to be as good as,
Wow.
So I really think that, so I credit my parents for having me in situations where I was mentally prepared to succeed.
So many of us don't have we come from broken homes sometimes, and so you were blessed for that. And we both benefited from Brown versus Board of Education.
Absolutely.
That was such a significant thing. To those of you out there who don't know that, look it up. It really helped shape it. Would you say that it helped shape your ability to be around other cultures? Because let's face it, when you're in your own household and you only see people that look like you, it may be a culture shock to go out and see people that are other than you.
Oh, absolutely. Let me say this. no matter where you lived in America, the civil rights struggle that was taking place predominantly in the South and the legislation that resulted from those years of protest and sacrifice through the Dr. King and all of his apostles nonviolent movement, that benefited every African American throughout the country. And I think it was also beneficial to white people because it opened their eyes to certain injustices and to understanding what some members of society were facing that didn't impact them adversely. So yeah, I know I owe a debt to all those who come before me over the years, and we can go back hundreds of years because each generation of African Americans has made it easier for the next generation. And so, yeah, so knowing that I have that debt, I just try to find ways in my own life and in my own way to repay that. If it's as simple as always voting, because there were people who died and sacrificed their lives so that people would have the right of the franchise. And so I don't take these things for granted. The ability I had to go to the best college and best college and law school, at least one of the best. The ability I've had to live where I've chosen to live, to send my kids to schools that my wife and I have chosen to send them to. So no, I don't take those things lightly. I don't take them for granted. I know that those rights were won through blood, sweat, and tears. And it's important that every American, and particularly African Americans, understand that and honor that in how we conduct our lives.
True.
You know what? We have a lot in common. My father was an alcoholic too.
Were you scared of him?
You scared of this new guy?
Yeah. He stares at me and makes me feel, I don't know, powerless.
My dad used to make me feel the same way at times.
As a child, you actually wanted to be in the arts. And so
Yeah, a lot of things I wanted to
Yeah.
do when I was a child. I was fortunate enough to do 2 out of the 3 things I wanted to do. But I knew early on that I wanted to. My initial desires were to be a professional baseball player because baseball was America's pastime, and that was the really hot game and hot sport when I was growing up. I wanted to be an actor and I wanted to get involved in politics. And my dad exposed me to baseball early on, and he played in the Negro Baseball League for the Newark Eagles the summer after he graduated from high school. So certainly I know that my dad played a role in shaping that vision and desire of mine. But I didn't really have any actors I didn't have any actors in the family. I didn't have any politicians in the family. At the age of 14, when I knew I was probably headed to law school, it's not because I had lawyers in the family. It's not because I knew any lawyers. But I think I had a pretty good sense of my skills and my interest. And so I kind of had an idea where that might lead me.
what's interesting though is that, like you said, you had a dearth of those things, but yet somehow you end up in Caribou at college. Did you do a play?
No, I did do my first Caribou play until actually I was about 55 years old.
55. But did you show up at Caribou at all?
Well, I had, when I graduated from law school, I turned down job offers from law firms in Los Angeles and here in Cleveland.
Okay.
And my initial plan was to accept a job offer that had been made by a small law firm in New York City. And I was going to go to New York and devote half my time to the law and the other half to acting and writing. And so I came to Cleveland the summer of 1980 just so that I could take the bar exam and be a lawyer somewhere.
Yeah.
Complete that journey, because you not only have to graduate from law school, you actually have to pass the bar exam in some state so that you are then a licensed attorney. So while I was in Cleveland, Caribou was having its first all-equity show, which meant all the actors were going to get paid union scale to perform, which was a radical thing at Caribou because many of the actors over the years had worked for free or for a very small stipend. So here Caribou was going to be staging the iconic work by Lorraine Hansberry, Raisin in the Sun.
Wow.
So I auditioned for it. And I was invited to callbacks, which was a good sign. It showed that even though I had never performed at Karamu, even though my acting resume was very thin, that I was good enough for them to want to take a second look and consider me for the lead role. But I didn't get the role. And then I said, and it reminded me of my senior year at college when I auditioned for a play and didn't get the role, and I was crushed by it. Karamu saying no back in the fall of late summer, early fall of 1980 just reminded me of that very painful moment. And I decided at that point, I said, I'll be darned if I'm going to go to New York and knock my head against two hard walls, the law and theater at the same time. So I stayed here. I ended up clerking with the Ohio Supreme Court with Ralph Locher, who at one point was the mayor in Cleveland. As a matter of fact, that was who Carl Stokes defeated when he was elected to the mayoralty back in 1967.
Wow.
So by this time, Ralph Locher was a member of the Ohio Supreme Court. So I ended up clerking with him. And I think I was the first African-American law clerk ever hired by a European-American justice of the Ohio Supreme Court. So I remember that. And then a year and a half later, I decided to run for Shaker Heights City Council. So my political career began in the fall of 1983 when I won that maiden election of mine.
And speaking of that, I know when you started in 1983, your mom was, she was always very supportive, especially when you ran for city council. You know, she was, and you know, you said that remember you saying that she always would grab people and ask them
She would buttonhole
vote?
people. She would be at Van Aken, one of the shopping districts in Shaker, and she would go up to people and say, my son is running for Shaker Heights City Council. He's a Harvard Law graduate. He's this and that. You really should vote for him. And then I can remember I'll never forget when my dad and I, because every day I would go out campaigning door to door, no matter what the weather was like. So this was one late fall day, and it was a cold rain, which is like the worst weather to be in. And there was my dad, he and I walking door to door in Shaker Heights, promoting my candidacy. So both of my parents were very involved. But anytime there was, back in those days, you used to have to stuff envelopes for your mailers when you were sending things out to constituents.
Yeah.
My mom and her friends, my godmother Jewel Howison and Aunt Edwina and some of the teachers my mom had taught with, Aunt Lorraine, they'd all be gathered together and help stuff those envelopes and stuff them, seal them, and stamp them and get them. I mean, nothing like family and friends. And that's who I relied on during that first campaign.
It's the ultimate support system, actually.
Oh, it certainly is. There's none better. Nobody will advocate for you better than your parents and my wife. And I think my wife at that time was my girlfriend, and she was equally active in the campaign. So shout out to Lisa Payne Jones.
Wow.
And while we're at it, to Ryan Charles Jones, my oldest son, Leah Danielle Jones, my daughter, and Evan Cook Jones, my youngest.
Wow, that's a proud father and a proud husband right there.
I'm a fortunate one, blessed one.
I just think that Peter Lawson Jones has the unusual capability to adjust and pivot in almost any endeavor that he could think of. As a matter of fact, I would venture to say every endeavor, because we're talking about a man who's a politician, who is a county commissioner, who is an attorney, who is a coach, who is an actor. You talk about your wife, Lisa. Talk about that hilarious, serendipitous moment as to how you even came to know about her and what that built into.
Well, a couple of funny moments when you talk about that origin story of a marriage that's now 37 years in length, and I've known her, it'll be 42 years this fall. I was having lunch at a restaurant on 12th near Chester called the Celery Stalk.
Downtown Cleveland.
Downtown Cleveland. I think I was a year out of law school at that time. Mm-hmm. And I was having lunch with two other lawyers. Both of them were women, one of whom I had dated. Okay. And so two other younger women come in, and the one approaches me and introduces herself. She says, "Hi, I'm Leslie Walker, and I was a student at Harvard, and I used your senior thesis as a resource for a paper I was writing." And there was another woman with her, and she introduced me to her, and that woman was Lisa. And so I chat with Lisa a few minutes, and both of them a few minutes, and I asked Lisa where she worked. I didn't want to be tactless and ask her for her phone number.
Right.
But I figure if I found out where she worked, I knew how to get in touch with her. So I call her a week or so later and ask her out to lunch. And Lisa says that the reason she figured out who I was, because I was the only guy she had met in the last week. So she, I see, I really made a great impression.
Right.
So we agreed to meet. She was working for Ameritrust at the time,
Yeah.
which is now PNC, I believe. And so there's a clock still there at the corner of East 9th and Euclid, at the southeast corner.
Okay.
And so she would agree that she would wait for me at that clock, and I was working down at Public Square with a law firm, and so I took the bus from Public Square to East 9th, and a friend of mine was on the bus with me. As a matter of fact, the guy I ended up acting with in plays, and he was cast in one of my plays, Kenny Charles. So Kenny and I are chatting. He said, "Oh, so what are you on your way to do?" I said, "I'm getting ready to meet this woman for lunch." He said, "Oh, yeah. What'd she look like?" I said, "Well, I remember being real cute." I said, "But I tell you what, Kenny, she's going to be waiting for me under that clock. And so when the bus gets to that stop, I'm going to look out. And if she's not as I remember her, I'm going to keep riding the bus with you." and so we arrive at East 9th and Euclid. I look out, I see her, and Kenny said, "Okay, so what you going to do?" I said, "Man, I'm getting off the bus."
Wow.
And so that's the story of our
I just-
first date and how Lisa and I met.
I love that. It's, first of all, that's a story that will always be amazing. I mean, 50 years later, 100 years later, that's such a powerful origin story. And it just means that you guys were supposed to be
I
together.
guess there was some destiny to
Yeah,
it,
it was
right?
destiny. It absolutely was. And like I said, it was serendipity.
And she has been the sounding board, the most important sounding board in my life. I've always said that there were people who held the official title, campaign manager, in my various campaigns.
Yeah.
But when it was time for some tough decisions where I really needed to get somebody else's perspective, and the perspective that was a little bit different from my own,
Yeah.
that's who I would talk to. That's who I'd consult with.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, because it's a lot of people that they're sick of their significant other after, even forget 30 years, forget 40 years, 30 beers, 40
Yeah, right.
beers, but, and I think that you still speak about her with a certain fondness that's distinctive, and I admire that.
Well, I would be an ingrate if I didn't appreciate all that she has done for me in my life, and the kind of mother she's been, the kind of wife, kind of human being she is. And, let me say this, marriage is not easy.
Yeah.
There were many times when she should have righteously and rightfully kicked me to the curb.
Yikes.
But we worked through it. I had the example of my parents who were married 55 years before my father passed. And that's a powerful example that you try to emulate. And so you work through things. But it's just like a rose has its thorns, so does a marriage. But you know what's important, and you survive and you prosper.
I was very fascinated and very inspired by the way that Peter spoke about his wife. I mean, you can tell there was like a reverence that he has for her. And I think a lot of us can learn from that. Not only are those eloquent words, but it's words to really live by. Especially when
And I
it's
think
someone,
people need to realize that when they get married or when they begin a meaningful relationship, they need to understand that. And, there are going to be challenges. That's life.
Yeah. I told my girlfriend that I was not looking for a girlfriend. I said I was never going to, I was expecting just to, have a bunch of just random girls for the next 20 years. But it turns out my girlfriend made herself undeniable.
There you go.
And so she is the only
And
person.
integral.
Yes.
To your life.
And it's a difference between changing someone and making someone evolve. And that's the difference. So like I always say, I say in one of my books, I won't change for anyone, but I will evolve for everyone.
For everyone.
And so,
I like that.
Yeah, there's a difference.
And let me tell you this. When I was in law school, I remember sitting around with my law school roommate and saying, "Man, I'm never going to get married. I'm going to be single my whole life." Why not? They're making, what they say, every minute there's another beautiful woman being created. So
Right.
so that's what I was planning to do. I didn't think I was going to have kids.
Yeah.
And that's when I was in my mid to late 20s almost.
I think that's
But
what they mean when they say that we plan, God laughs.
there you go. God laughs at our plans. Absolutely.
On top of everything else, you are a playwright and actor. You also teach acting. What is it like living a creative life and getting to express yourself? I ask that for myself because I like to express myself.
You know, it's interesting because if I'm referenced as a creative, as an artist, I said, well, I guess so. It's funny. I've never really considered my acting art, but I know it is because it's always come rather naturally to me. That doesn't mean I don't work at it, but I think we all have natural gifts, and I think that's one of mine. And my mom gave me the best piece of advice when I was growing up. As I was learning to read, she said, "Peter, read with expression."
Yeah.
And I think that has put me in good stead as a lawyer in the courtroom, as an elected official and politician, and obviously as an actor. Because you can't read with expression unless you understand what it is you're reading.
Yes.
And if you haven't analyzed what you're reading and what the writer is trying to express, then you cannot do it convincingly. So I've always felt that's been somewhat a natural gift, helped by my mom's counsel and advice. It's interesting. It was actually my college roommate who influenced me both to become an actor, because he invited me to a rehearsal for a play that he was in. And I ended up, I offered to help the director read a couple of parts because the director hadn't cast all the roles. And at the end of the rehearsal, the director asked me would I'd like to play those roles. And I said, yeah, okay. That's how my acting career started. And I wrote my first play because I was so impressed with the artistic ability of this same roommate. He's a wonderful visual artist. As a matter of fact, if you enter my home, turn to the right, you'll see a piece of his artwork mounted on the wall. He was also a poet. And I said, man, I'd like to do something creative like that. But I really don't have skills as a visual artist. I don't really like poetry. It just seems a little bit too saccharine for me, a little bit too maudlin. But hey, I do like theater. I do enjoy plays, so maybe I'll write a play. That's how it got started. So when I think of my artistic journey, which really I wrote my first play when I was in college.
The official billboard. Legend.
I mean, I started acting again in 2008 was my first play after 28 years. I had not acted for almost 3 decades. I'd started writing my second play probably in 2003, 2004. It took me 10 years to finish that, right? Wow. Because it's just, I didn't have the time. My third play, interestingly enough, I wrote in 2 or 3 months because I had been commissioned to write it by a local agency, the Life Exchange Center, and they had a production date in mind. And initially I balked at accepting the commission because I said, man, I've never written under that kind of pressure where I have to turn out a full-length play. Wow. As a matter of fact, they needed to be at least 60 or 70 minutes. It ended up being a full-length 2-hour play. And fortunately I was able to churn it out. And I won't even say churn it out. It flowed as easily as anything I'd ever written. I was able to write it in like 2 or 3 months while I was oftentimes on set in Pittsburgh working on A Man Called Otto. I would come home from set and work on writing the play.
Yeah.
But initially I was really nervous about doing it because anything I'd ever written about, I had chosen the subject. And this subject had been selected for me. I needed to write something consistent with the mission of the Life Exchange Center, which helps men and women who are struggling with substance abuse, addiction, and mental health challenges. So I had the topic, I had a deadline, and I ran into somebody who said, Peter, quit equivocating and just write the darn play.
Yeah.
I said, okay. And I did it. It worked out perfectly.
How many plays would you estimate that you've written?
Oh, I've only written 3 plays. I'm working on a 4th.
Okay.
Yeah.
You are an accomplished actor, and you have a new film called A Man Called Otto with Tom Hanks.
Yes.
Talk about your role in that movie.
I play the character of Reuben. Tom Hanks plays Otto. And Reuben and Otto at one time were best friends. But something happened, and Otto blamed Reuben for the result, and so they became estranged. I play Reuben at two different ages and in two very different physical conditions. And my relationship, or Reuben's relationship with Otto, is one of the things that helps change the trajectory of Otto's life.
Wow. Now, we all know that Tom Hanks is iconic. You're also
And
iconic.
deservedly so.
Yes. What was it like? And I know you've heard this a million times, but what was it like being off the record with him? Meaning, when the cameras are not rolling, what was that like? Because you hear about pretentious Hollywood types. I've never heard that about him, but I just want to know from a first-hand perspective, what is this guy like off the record?
Oh, he's insufferable, unbearable. No, the truth is this. First, please understand, he's an absolute genius as an actor. Mm-hmm. He sees things in scenes, and he just makes suggestions and recommendations that enhance and improve the scene. And I've not worked with, and I've had the pleasure of working with now 3 people who've won Academy Awards and 2 that have won Emmy Awards. And let me say this, they all were wonderful people. I had great interactions with all of them. Tom Hanks, as an actor, is in a class by himself. And the director of our film, Mark Forster, who worked with Halle Berry when she won her Academy Award in Monsters Ball, who worked with Daniel Craig in a James Bond film, Quantum of Solace, who did The Kite Runner, World War Z, Finding Neverland. I mean, this is a great director, and he says that of all the wonderful actors he's worked with, Tom Hanks is at the, in a class all by himself. But he's got a great sense of humor, and he's just such a wonderfully down-to-earth person. I mean, he and I have exchanged probably 3 dozen emails and even some old-fashioned snail mail since I worked with him. As a matter of fact, he has an affinity for manual typewriters.
Wow.
So I have a couple of typewritten notes from him. And he has a handwritten note that I sent him after working with him after I wrapped on set. And when he threw out the first pitch at the Guardians baseball game, he invited me to sit with him in the Loge, sit with him and some of his other friends. And everybody else in the Loge went back with him 40 years to his days with the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival in Cleveland. Yeah. So if you have him as a friend, he's going to be a lifelong friend.
That's powerful because in a way it kind of comes full circle, because I know, like you said, he kind of cut his teeth in Cleveland. I think he did something in Playhouse Square back in the 1980s.
And a lot of his productions too were, I think the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival was then housed in Lakewood.
Okay.
But I believe some of his performances were downtown in Playhouse Square.
And this was before Bosom Buddies. Remember
yes.
that?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So, we're talking some serious time ago.
Yeah, we're talking over 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And like I say, he's still friends with the people that he worked with at the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival, and credits many of them with helping him to get established and survive those first couple of years in New York City.
That's so powerful. That's just such a powerful testimony.
No, he does. The goodwill that he's received from the general public, he's earned. He deserves.
Yeah, and you know what's funny is that, I don't know if you remember this, but back in March of 2020, when he and his wife, Rita Wilson, they were, I think, in Australia, and they came down with COVID. And this was before people were taking it seriously. But when he got it, everything changed. And then all of a sudden it became, I think it was like around March 6th.
It was. He was an early adapter.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was like the Tim Berners-Lee of COVID in a sense. But yeah, he definitely was the one that brought attention to it, because it was almost like, well, if Tom Hanks can get it.
Right.
And then within about 5 days, the world shut down, and it wasn't the same for. It's still not quite the same, but it's gotten a lot better.
Oh,
since then.
no, we've made the adjustments.
Yeah.
And I think it's inevitable that all of us will get COVID at some point.
Yeah.
But like I did 2 days before my 70th birthday, ironically. Wow. But I had both vaccinations, and I say I'm doubly vaxxed and twice vaxxed and thrice boosted. So I did everything, and I was really only down for 1 day.
Wow.
After that, I was, other than a cough and some congestion, I was fine.
Yeah. You're spry. That's why.
Yeah, I'm a spry 70-year-old, spry septuagenarian. Yeah.
You want to know what Wayne Dawson does when he's become a best-selling author? He works very hard to do it again.
Yeah, I'm really working hard.
He makes working hard look easy.
Yeah, he does.
The seeds of greatness are within you. Now available where books are sold. And you also mentioned that, I heard you say that you spoke with the legendary and esteemed Cicely Tyson, and you were doing the Tyler Perry film Alex Cross.
Correct.
Did you ever meet Tyler Perry?
Yes, he was on the set with me. I met him long enough to introduce myself, say hi, shake hands. We had a little scene, 2 scenes that we did together. One of them made it into the final cut. But in between, I had met Cicely Tyson in 1972 on campus at Harvard College when she was doing Sounder.
Sounder.
I met her 40 years later on the set of Alex Cross. We had a chance to chat for at least 30 minutes in between scenes, in between takes.
Oh, man.
And, she was quite gracious with her time.
Yeah, there are just some people that just exude like something where it's almost like they kind of like walk on water.
There's a class and sophistication to them. Yeah.
Not to be sacrilegious, but I mean, she's one of those people. I mean,
They're reverential.
Yeah.
People in there.
Definitely,
Yeah,
definitely. Like, I imagine it was like that meeting someone like Maya Angelou or Toni Morrison or someone like that.
Legends.
Yeah. And I know that you mentioned that you guys had a really good conversation about her when she was
Yes.
in her early stages trying to become an actress. And what was that story?
It's an unforgettable story. She was telling me of the moment that she announced to her parents, specifically her mother, and her parents were West Indian immigrants, so they had a very serious, hardworking, a very serious perspective on life, and she informed her mother that she was going to be an actress. And her mother said, "Oh, that's fine, but you will have to move out of our house."
Wow.
And that's what Cicely did. She moved out and pursued her acting career.
Wow.
So she did. So she was kind of walking the tightrope without any safety net below her.
Wow. I think that's powerful because you only need one person to believe in you, and that's yourself.
Right.
And that's a perfect articulation of that mindset. So
And her parents might very well have believed in her, but they just didn't see a future in acting, and some people still think it's a rather frivolous pursuit to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
It's not serious. And most people, 99% of the people, never make a dollar doing it. And so they probably had a legitimate fear for the future of her daughter and would have preferred that she pursued something more secure like teaching or being a nurse, those kind of fields that tended to be more open to African American women back in the, oh my goodness, what is that, the 40s and 50s when Cicely was coming of age.
And I will admit, I do speed on the way to work. I got stopped the other day in Euclid. I was like, I was doing 80 in a 65 or 60. On my way to work, this guy pulls me over, and I think he's gonna because usually when they pull me over, they give me a break. They say, okay, you want to slow it down. This guy gave me a ticket. $250 later. I said, you must watch Channel 3 or something.
your next film that you have coming up, I'm sure it's going to be a doozy. Tell us a little bit about that, if you can.
Sure. I'd gladly tell you about it. The first thing is I'm also in another film that's out on Amazon Prime called On Sacred Ground. And David Arquette stars in that, as does William Mapfowler. Now, he's had a successful career, but you would probably best know of him because he is Tom Cruise's cousin. Tom Cruise's real last name is Mapfowler.
What?
Right. It's really Thomas Mapfowler.
Yikes.
So I'm in a film with his cousin William, and it's about a reporter who's sent out to cover the Native American protest relative to the extension of the pipelines, the oil pipelines on tribal lands. So it's really kind of based on what has really happened, or it's kind of art imitate or art expanding upon life. So that's now on Amazon Prime, and my next film, I'm especially excited about this. It's called The Last Shop on Walnut, and I'll be playing the lead. So this will be my first opportunity to have a lead role and really help carry a film. I'm in virtually every scene, and it's a beautiful little story about a middle-aged shopkeeper. He owns a lamp store, and he sells and repairs lamps. His shop is on the first floor in this neighborhood that's began to change, and as a consequence, his business is beginning to fail. He owes a lot in bills, and he lives on the second floor. His residence is on the second floor, and because of certain traumatic incidents that have happened in his life, he has not left this building in well over a decade.
Wow.
His relationship with his brother has been fractured. He never married. He was dating a woman, and obviously his psychosis in not being willing to go outside resulted in the end of their relationship. And but something happens in his life that changes it. And so it's such a beautiful little film, written by a friend of mine, Jason Richardson, with whom I collaborated on an earlier project of his, a web series. And Jason is the director, the screenwriter, and the chief producer. I'm also serving as an executive producer on the film. So if anybody who's listening has ever wanted to see their name in the credits as an executive producer of a good film, they should reach out to me, and we see what we could work out. But the film is so powerful that we had just the table read, where the actors sit around reading through the script about a month ago. People were tearing up at the table read.
Wow.
And so I think this film really has some possibilities. I'm excited about it. I can't wait to get started with the filming this summer. I would imagine that it'll be early next year.
Okay.
Maybe late this year if things go swimmingly, before it will be publicly screened.
So is it possible they could win an Academy Award?
That's such a tough thing to do, right? But that's always, I think, every filmmaker and actor's dream. I do think this will have a great opportunity to be admitted into some of the more prominent and preeminent film festivals, and I think that a streaming service will certainly pick it up. Jason is close to landing a distributor, and when you can find a good distributor, that opens up the floodgates for possibility. So we'll see what happens. But I have no doubt that it's going to be a film that's going to be worth seeing, that's going to tug at the emotional heartstrings, and that tells a powerful story of family and community and isolation.
Well, I'm very excited about it because I can see your enthusiasm.
Oh, I'm extremely excited,
Yeah,
elated about this opportunity.
It's infectious.
Yeah.
And it's like you say, you are the poster child for never relinquishing your dreams. And I appreciate that, man. So I want to thank you.
I hope I am a role model, at least in that regard.
Of course.
That people who are middle-aged, even senior citizens, say, I gave up on doing something years ago, but maybe I should give it another shot.
Yeah.
That's what I want. I think my life tells that story. And I've been blessed enough that two of the things that I wanted to do when I was the age of 10, become an elected official and a politician and become an actor, I've been able to achieve that. So also, I think even to young kids, don't give up on your dreams.
Yeah.
And don't let anybody discourage you.
It's funny because people say, they look at my age and they're like, man, where have you been all these years? Because people are just like kind of noticing me. And I feel like, hey, I was big processing.
There you go.
And it's always in God's time,
Absolutely. My approach in politics was always what they call 3 yards on the football field, 3 yards and a cloud of dust. Just grind out 3 and 4 yards, and after 3 plays, you made a first down, you keep the ball, you keep advancing down the field till you score. A lot of people want to throw the Hail Mary. They don't want to put in the work. They don't want to lay the foundation. I'm willing to work. I'm willing to till the fields. And I think if you take that approach, you'll be amazed how many of your dreams can become reality.
Wow. I would say that is your enduring message, and you are living it by your active life and everything. We really appreciate you. I know I appreciate you.
Well, and God willing, and the creek don't rise, I ain't done yet.
Yes, we got to get your book out. This is the peerless Peter Lawson Jones. Thanks so much, man.
Deontay, it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last few weeks, and I'm very grateful, and I'm honored that you'd have me on your show. So impressed with you as a young man with feet firmly planted on the ground, pursuing aggressively and in the right way your dreams. So,
thank you so much. The check will be in the mail.
okay.
So my final take on the great Peter Lawson Jones is he is a privilege to speak with. He is a privilege to know. And I think that he is somebody that is such a gold standard of personal excellence and aspiration, and someone that we all can look to and say, I can do that. Peter, you rock.